Embiid driving, spinning, fading, hitting. 1.1 to go. Oh my goodness, Tyrese Maxey.
Daniel House fills the lane and fills it up.
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. My name is Sean Barnard, and I am back here with James Birrane. Been a little up and down with the schedule, just as far as a lot going on right now. I know we got Phillies in the run of things, got Flyer season kicking off. The vibes are high in Philadelphia, and the Sixers feel like the lone thing kind of trying to keep us down. But before we get any further, James, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm not going to let the Sixers get me down. I'll tell you that much. I'm still excited no matter what happens.
Yeah, totally. And as far as today's episode, I want to dive into the latest news with James Harden. There is constantly something with that storyline and the intertwining of things that are going on there. So touch on the James Harden stuff. Want to reflect a little bit on the preseason, some of the new additions now that we have a little more that we have seen to work with. I am seeing my excitement level raise for his team, so I'm excited to talk about that a little bit, as well as the news that Joel Embiid has signed with Skechers, a new shoe deal for the Sixers center. I'm excited about that as well. So we're going to break it all down here. And without further ado, let's dive right into things. So, James, we get this notification. It's been a little too quiet on the James Harden front, I think. And all of a sudden, he just said, I'm not coming. So to recap exactly what happened. So Sunday was the last time that James Harden had been with the team. I know in the Shams tweet that he said that Harden had not been with the team since Sunday. That is a little misleading just on the fact that it was the Sixers schedule was they practiced Sunday. He was with the team. Monday, they had the preseason game, which he was not expected to be a part of from start to finish. Tuesday, the team was off. And then Wednesday was when there was the practice, which Harden elected to no-show from. So as of this morning, we get this little notification from Shams right here saying that James Harden is a no-show at Sixers practice today. James, what's your reaction and what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the start of it, right? It was time for him to get uncomfortable, so he made things uncomfortable. But I think the weird part about all of this for me, the way I look at it, is this is just making things harder for him as well. I don't really see the best outcome for him happening by not showing up, not playing, not being a part of the team. And it's weird how over the last 2 weeks or so, we've heard just about only good things coming from camp and coming from his teammates and the team basically saying, yeah, he's been here, he's been productive, he's been helpful, he's been a full participant, and he's caused no problems. And then today, for him to just not show up, the report is that he's been in Houston. God knows what he's doing in Houston. So I don't know, man. It's a weird thing going on. This whole thing has been strange and played out very poorly by him. And we've gotten a lot of updates from the trade front, and I'm sure we'll talk about that and that's going to come down to. But it seemed like things were starting to trend in the direction of a resolution, and now it seems like he's kind of just dropped the bomb and pushed things back. So I don't know what his plan is.
Yeah, I've kind of been confused by that as well. I guess my takeaway on it is I do think that he bought into the best way to get traded is to be on my best behavior. Let me show up, do my thing, work hard, and let it happen. And I think he just grew impatient way too quickly. That Harden, like hitting the button of it's not happening quick enough right now, doesn't do anyone any good. That in the situation we're in, it's very clear that Daryl Morey has his target price for James Harden, that he has the value that he has him labeled as. Who James Harden should be upset at is the Los Angeles Clippers for not reaching that value. If they wanted James Harden that badly, they would have made a trade for James Harden by now. It is as simple as that if James Harden was that important to the Los Angeles Clippers, he would be on the team by now. They're not that serious about him, and I totally get why. That I have honestly gotten into the sticks a little bit, watching some of the behind-the-scenes stuff at Clippers camp. It is all good vibes over there. That team seems like they're sticking together. That as much as last year was a weird year, in the past couple of years, really, with the injuries and everything, it feels like Russell Westbrook has really made a positive influence from like a leadership standpoint. That for everything that people want to say about Russ, he is a guy that shows up, competes every single night, and that's something that team needs. Like he's bringing a leadership, he's bringing energy, and I also respect from Russ that he's kind of swallowed this pride a little bit at this point in his career, and he's still making a positive impact. To compare that to James Harden over here, obviously very different players from a stylistic standpoint, from an impact standpoint, from just the way they play, the impact they make on a game, drastically different players. But the way that Russ has kind of been able to adapt his game and still find ways to make a positive impact is far different from the way that James Harden. Now, James Harden is obviously a better basketball player than Russell Westbrook at this point in both their careers. I'm not arguing that whatsoever. But he's also a guy that this is the third team that he's now causing a blow up on. And if you're the Clippers, who are already kind of teetering on the edge of they have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on expiring contracts, they have Russell Westbrook on a 1-year deal, there is a world where they are a nothing organization next year. Why would you mortgage that complete future to bring this guy into your franchise? So I really think it boils down to that. And I just think James Harden's anger is misguided. It should be at his value. His value is not as high as he thought it was. Daryl Morey kind of called that, and we're kind of seeing where we are.
Yeah, and I think that like the only way for him to rebuild his value at all is to play, and that's been the whole point of this all is come in, do your job, be who you are, show them that, you know, that you could be helpful to their franchise and that you could be the quote unquote missing piece for them, and make that happen. But rather than that, it seems like he's going the opposite direction of just like sitting out, and making it a problem for everyone. I will say, like, in October, the first week of October, first 2 weeks of October, everyone's vibes are great. You know, I feel like every team is feeling like, oh, we're doing awesome. Everyone's improved. Everyone's healthy. Everyone, you know, has had the best summer. Everyone's in the best shape of their life. We've heard that story far too many times, from various portions of this franchise, but you never know. I think really my thought process on this all was this is going to go well into November. He was going to take a couple weeks to play, be who he is, do his thing, put up some good numbers, and make it easier for Morey to trade him. It seems like he doesn't want to do that, and they're going to give him the chance to explain himself. As Joel said, maybe he had something to do. Who knows what the deal is with that right now. So the fines are going to be incoming, I suppose, with him missing team activities. It's going to keep coming in. We all kind of thought we might get a glimpse of him for, you know, in a Sixers uniform for the first time in a while on Friday. That seems to be up in the air. So things are going to start crashing down here soon. Season starts in a week. So, you know, there's a lot to be worried and nervous about over the next week or so.
Yeah, a couple points I want to jump in here on. Number one, I've seen a lot of hate being thrown at Joel for those comments on the James Harden thing. What do you want the man to say? Like, what is a better answer there? He has no clue where James Harden is. He probably has the same exact intel as us, that he has no clue on the situation. And I honestly just feel bad for Joel that this keeps happening, that he keeps being put in this spot of trying to explain why his teammates are being assholes. It feels like every year that we're dealing with it. And I had no issue with the statement for what he said. I kind of respect that he stood up, and I still kind of respect he is handling this with a very different tone than he did with Ben Simmons. That it's very clear there was much more of a hatred for the Ben Simmons situation, and there should be based on all these circumstances and how all the events led up to each of these, that's completely understandable. But it's clear that Joel's got a little bit more of a friendly outlook to Harden, and part of that I think is from the team stance of it was clear that the bridge was burnt with Ben Simmons. The bridge is not burnt between James Harden and the team. It's just with James Harden and Daryl Morey. So I do think that's an important difference there. If I'm the Sixers right now, if I'm Daryl Morey, I think I'm giving James Harden a call and saying, look, don't come back, man. Stay away from the team. We will trade you whenever we can reach a deal, but we're going to keep doing our thing. If you're not interested, that's fine. I think that's honestly the best way to handle it. I don't know the legalities of these because of, number one, the missing. I was reading up a little bit on this. Shout out Bobby Marks from ESPN, who's very much in the know and kind of broke this down pretty well today. But number one, the fine situation is above the Sixers. That is not their decision. That's a league issue. The NBA is fining James Harden for missing these. So the Sixers can't even look the other way, that it's between the league and James Harden. And frankly, the league is very much going to be in the Sixers' favor for this, for making sure that he's fulfilling his contractual obligations, which, by the way, is the point of a contract, that there's two sides to this. One party does one thing for something. I've also been shocked at the lack of, understanding of that statement. And by the way, James Harden, you opted into your player option, man. That you had the choice to go everywhere. That doesn't get brought up enough either. That you could have signed wherever you wanted this offseason, and instead you chose, let me accept that player option, lock in that $35 million, and we'll figure it out. And here we are trying to figure out. And the last point, or one more point, actually. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. But that 30-day thing that we've discussed, that does not only apply to just the 30 days of the start of the season. It's 30 days, period. So if James Harden from here on out decides I'm not coming back to the Sixers, the Sixers could control his basketball destiny and where he plays next. That 30 days could start the count from today if James Harden does not come back from here. Now, I'm, like I said, of the opinion that I would rather him not be around. So I don't know if they can work out something there as well. But I do think that was interesting as well. Anything on any of that, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't really understand the end goal of all this from him,
Yeah,
from his end. And like you said, I mean, this trade has been talked about. It seems like both sides have an understanding of where the other side is. It's really about meeting each other in the middle, and I don't think that Morey's going to budge too much. I think that the bar is already way too low for what
right.
he would be expecting in a return for James Harden. So, maybe it is, hey, stay away. We're going to let him go. Like, I don't know what their thought process is on all of this, but I don't think that this is good for the team. I don't think that him being a partial participant is good at all. I think I'd rather him be all in or all out.
Agreed.
Which is a similar sentiment that we shared a couple years ago. So it's just like, what do you want him to do at this point? The value is obviously still way too low, and he's trying. Like, it's not like he's not trying. I'm sure that they are having those conversations, and he really got put in a small box when the only team that Harden mentioned he would want to play for is
Right.
the Clippers, who don't have a lot of tradable assets, who already have traded away a lot of their future picks, who are already in a really tough position in terms of looking in the next 5 years. Their outlook isn't all that great when you consider their team's age and their last couple years of maybe underachieving. They're in a not great position. So I don't really see why they would go out of their way for this. It seems like that's where they are. And the Sixers are obviously saying, like, this, you kind of made your bed, so you got to sleep in it right now. And
Right.
hopefully there is an end here soon in the next couple of weeks. But I could imagine that this might go on for a decent while, don't you think?
Yeah, and we got this this report from Keith Pompey today that the Sixers asking price for James Harden for the Clippers, 2 first-round picks and Terrence Mann. That is not unreasonable for a James Harden value. Like, I get the situation, I get the baggage that comes with them, but that is far less than what you would perceive the market value of for James Harden. Now, I it's very clear, like, his market value is shockingly lower than what he believed he was, and that's kind of the root of all this. That's honestly, that is the root of all this. Like, that's why the Sixers didn't want to pay him. That's why no other team wanted to pay him. That's why James Harden accepted the player option so he could make sure he locked in that amount. And that's why he can't find a trade. Is when you act like James Harden has acted for the past decade, when I mean forcing your way to other teams, not being happy, whether you're the superstar, whether you're on a super team, none of these situations fitting. Teams notice that eventually the talent has to cover up for the baggage. And as you're declining in talent and impact on the field, and that baggage continues, teams begin to look the other way. And I just, it blows my mind that this has not computed in Harden's head exactly. And one of the things that you brought up there, James, is what is the end game here? Because we're at the same bridge, we're at the same issue where the Clippers are not reaching the value that Daryl Morey needs to make a deal. Holding out and causing a bunch of scenes at training camp is not going to motivate the Clippers to up their offer. And James Harden's very dead set on that. So yeah, I just don't get the end game. And unfortunately, like, I think this is only the beginning of things. And I think the next couple days specifically are going to be pretty decisive on what the route is from here.
And maybe it's better for it to blow up now rather than later. Maybe this is the time to just get it out of the way. It sucks that it's happening at this point compared to a couple months ago. And I feel like all of this could have been handled a lot differently from the beginning rather than, where we are now. So I don't know, man. I feel like this could be another thing where he doesn't end up in LA. Maybe he does, there is a third team that takes their chance on him. And that's going to have to be the case. I think if Morey's going to get like the actual return that he wants, rather than have to make this like maybe a 2-team trade or I'm sorry, a 3-team trade in 2 parts, however that he might try to work that out with the picks. But you got to assume, right? And maybe this can kind of end this conversation at some point, but Morey trading for 2 first-round picks, really the big part of that is so he can have their 2 first-round picks to flip, right? Like this, they're not really. They're not gonna stash those and wait for the next 6 years to cash those in.
Right.
They're gonna be moving on from those pretty quickly. So you got to imagine like he's also trying to set up with other teams and having those conversations like, hey, if I can get this second first, can we make this move? And like it's gonna get complicated, and those things don't happen overnight. So the blow up happening right now, like maybe this gets done in the next couple of weeks if they can, push for that additional pick or push for that additional player, whatever it is, and then make that secondary move that might net them what they're actually looking for, which God knows who it is or which team or which player it might be. But you got to imagine that the lens goes a little bit farther past the Clippers because that's not the end game for the Sixers, although it is for Harden. So there's still a lot to like unfold with this. And I don't think even if Harden gets traded, that is the last thing that happens to this roster before Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dive into the roster a little bit now. But my last point on Harden is it's just such a yes, he's a very good basketball player, but it's such a niche amount of teams that could use him that you have to number one be at least a fringe contender that you can talk yourself into Harden helping your team win. You have to need a point guard because he's not doing anything off ball. He has to be a guy who has the ball in his hands and running an offense. And you have to be okay with the downsides of his game. You have to have guys that can cover up for him defensively. You have to have athletes around him that are able to play off him as guy that catches lobs, as guys that cut to the rim. It's a niche. Like you need the perfect setup for James Harden to succeed much more than I think it is recognized. Like those Houston teams were tailor-made and built for him. And yes, Harden has adjusted his game to some extent, but he absolutely still has weaknesses. He's far from a perfect basketball player. And I think like the list of teams that it makes sense for is much smaller than he realizes. If you want to throw out a team like the Raptors, maybe, or something like that, getting in the mix, but Miami Heat, I brought up a lot. That makes sense, but it doesn't help his market that all this is happening. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the better vibes of the team and these Sixers that are actually playing basketball for them right now. So the preseason, we got one more game to go now. I've been pretty impressed with what we've seen. And the first guy that I want to jump to and talk about is Patrick Beverley. I think he has read the playbook for how to endear yourself to the Philadelphia fans. We saw him get ejected against the Nets. The final straw was him chirping Ben Simmons from the bench, who was getting into it with Philip Petrusev, as Pat Bev calls him, Philip with an F. So what's your takeaways on Pat Bev and how we feeling from here, James?
I'm sure you saw the clip from his podcast today talking about it, which was just great. It really does, like, honestly though, like as much as it is like, yeah, he's pandering, he's doing what like everyone wants him to do. I do think
It's
it
him.
comes from it is him. I think it does come a very genuine place. And the way he spoke about it was like, you just love to have a guy like that on your team. Like he's protecting one of his guys, like one of the younger guys on the team that hasn't really gotten a chance to play much. And it's funny to hear that like he was chirping the entire game, and he goes, Tobias was whooping your ass on the other end, and all that like is just great to hear. And then getting kicked out of the preseason game, it seems funny at the time, but it might like that goes a long way in a locker room. I think him going out of his way to protect one of his younger guys that, dude, they can hardly know each other at this point. Like Philip Petrusev, they're from opposite ends of the earth, and he's going to go out of his way and get ejected from a preseason game, showing up for his teammates. So I love to see that. I'm sure the city loves to see it. And he's a guy that was very quickly endearing himself to the city. And we all kind of knew this was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to happen in the third preseason game, but earlier the better with that, I guess.
Yeah, and I want to play this clip here because this tells the Pat Bev story for me even more so than the ejection to me. Is just look at the reaction from Pat Bev. This is after Philip with an F hits his three-pointer here. And look at the Pat Bev reaction. So there's the made three from Petrusev, which look at Pat Bev. Like, I love that. That's a guy that has been in the NBA forever. That is a made man by NBA standards. And we got Philip Petrusev, who's on a non-guaranteed contract. And Patrick Beverley is more excited than him that he just made that three. That, if we're being honest, has a chance of being the difference of whether he makes this roster. It's not situations like that. So I do think it's very cool that Pat Bev is like taking that defense mindset that he is sticking up for his guys. And that does go a long way. That setting the tone. PJ Tucker was talked about as such as like this dog when we brought him in, but Tucker is such like a lead by example, keep my head down and work guy. Pat Bev is so much more like expressive and outward in the way that he goes about the game that I think is important to this team. And even like a step further is I was trying to put my finger on what it is about Pat Bev that like he's just funny, man. Like there's something about things that is just like so like even like the thing with Claxton, like him just walking over, smacking the ball down, and then being surprised when like Claxton takes issue with it. Or I think back to like last year, like when he took the camera over to the referee after like that missed call, like the fact he even thought about that and then when and actually did it is so funny. So there is like this grit, this grind, but there's a part of Patrick Beverley that is just like straight up entertaining, and I really do love that. Like that's a part of him. Yeah, and I do feel like there's going to be games this season where Patrick Beverley not decides the game, but makes valuable plays like down the stretch, that I trust him in ways that we haven't had guys in this situation. I'm excited to see that as a part. And I have a take that I want to throw at you, James.
Go ahead.
I think this is the deepest Sixers team we've ever seen in the Joel Embiid era. Your thoughts?
I fully agree with you. I actually had this conversation earlier today. It's why it's so frustrating to be in the position that we're in with Harden and this roster, because like this is the first time ever that you have like 9 guys, genuinely like at least 9 that can come in and play and make an impact doing different things. And this is like seeing it happen live in this preseason. Obviously, Joel hasn't been out there, and Harden hasn't been out there, but all these guys are being empowered by the offense and being able to do what they do defensively. They're high intensity, and they are in a system that I think really helps cover some flaws and open up their strengths. That when if you had either a bought in Harden or a replacement for that, those minutes and those points and that money, you'd be in a much, much better position. And that's why when people talk about how, dim the future is and how, this is not going to go well at all, I do have some pushback, because I'm like, dude, they're in as good of a position right now as they've been in the last 3 years. And they've been a top 4 team in their conference every year for the last 5 years. So imagine had you just had this deep of a bench or had these different guys that can do different things along the way. Like they haven't had a guy like Kelly Oubre off the bench ever.
Mm-hmm.
And even just that.
Yeah, and by the way, I have a cool piece coming out on Kelly Oubre on Philly Sports Network, so make sure to stay posted for that. But Kelly's a guy that I want to talk about specifically, that the guys that I want to compare him to, that I believe he should be compared to by Sixers standards, is Matisse Thybulle and Jalen McDaniels. That I think he's more or less a replacement of that. And it's night and day how much better of a basketball player he is than either one of those guys. No disrespect to Matisse or Jalen McDaniels. They're fine. But Kelly Oubre scored 20 points per game last year. He's a guy that can create his own shot, and he's got some dog in him. Like, as much as he's got a little pretty boy vibe, and the way that he goes about things with the celebrations, all the Kelly Oubre experience, that is going to be some highs and lows this year, no doubt. There's moments where he can flip the switch, and Pat Bev talked about it on his pod today too, where he's like, that guy can pick up 94 feet. He will defend. He will do these things. And that's exciting. And that putback dunk he had, it's been since KJ McDaniels since we've seen a Sixer be able to have that level of athleticism hang in the air. Like that was very much like I watched that, and it gave out like a whoa moment for me of like, I haven't seen a Sixer in uniform show that kind of athleticism. And such a bummer, because that's more or less like a basic basketball play. Like you see this every night flipping around the NBA. But the Sixers just have not had a guy that is a lob threat, that is an athlete like Kelly Oubre, that can create his own shot. And he's, again, far from a perfect basketball player. He has his flaws. But for that to be a tool in the arsenal or an option that Nick Nurse can roll with is very exciting to me. And then when you think about guys like D'Anthony Melton, I think is going to take a step forward this year, that I think Nick Nurse can unlock him further, especially defensively. And I think like he's being an overlooked guy in this. Danny Green looks much more spry than I gave him credit. He looks like, I might even argue he's moving better than he did last time he was in Philadelphia, that he looks fresh again. He's had some time off. The shot is as pure as ever. He's not going to be a guy logging major minutes. Jaden Springer looks like he's ready for an opportunity. He's showing progress. There's some tools in this arsenal, and I'm very excited. And I guess to your point about like why the Sixers are in a bad spot, we're talking all about the sides and the appetizers here. Is the main course is still the concern, and that's what is going to get the Sixers over the hump. And when you look around the Eastern Conference, the Celtics added Drew Holiday. The Milwaukee Bucks traded for Damian Lillard, and these Sixers are sitting here arguing about James Harden for another offseason. So it's very frustrating that I'm bought in on this team from a vibes perspective, and I don't want to let it like cloud things with the James Harden, but I struggle to get myself fully invested because of that as well.
Yeah, I do want to look at it this way, and this might be flawed because of the current situation, obviously. But I look at the Denver Nuggets, like who won the championship last year? The Denver Nuggets. Like when you think about it, it's a dominant big man, a score first guard, and then a bunch of dudes that do a little bit of everything. Obviously, you have Michael Porter Jr. is a special talent. He's a lethal shooter, like absolutely lethal. And I don't think the Sixers necessarily have that. Aaron Gordon refound himself there, repurposed himself, and it's becoming perfect for them. Great fit. But then you like after that, dude, who like you have energy guys.
Bruce Brown was huge for them.
Bruce Brown was good, but like what does he do? He plays great defense. He rebounds. He's a connector offensively, but he's not really like sending you above a certain level offensively. He is limited there. Like, I'm not saying that team was fantastic, right? Like, very well built, but the Celtics and the Bucks went kind of the opposite way, and star power wins championships. Like, don't get me wrong, but the idea here is like, you do have that. You have Embiid. You hope that Maxey takes that step this year. You hope that a replacement or some sort of outcome from Harden's situation happens. And with that, you have a roster that's 9 guys deep, 10 guys deep that are going to be fighting for these spots that all of them kind of do a little bit of everything when you look down that line. Guys like, I mean, if you start with Oubre, Paul Reed, D'Anthony Melton, Jaden Springer, like those 4 guys alone are better than the combinations of bench pieces that we've had in like recent memory. Obviously, like Thibault was like deeply flawed as an offensive player, and honestly flawed as a defensive player as well.
Yeah.
You had, Furkan, who's still on this team somehow, but he was a rotation piece 2 years ago. Like, off the top of my head, like there's just guys like Seth Curry, obviously, but again, when you look back at that tape, dude, he was brutal. Like,
Kevin Huerter killed us in the play.
killed
Like,
him.
Kevin Huerter killing Seth Curry was arguably more of a reason than Ben Simmons in that series. And we don't got to fully rip the Band-Aid off here. But that point being, like, Seth Curry was another flawed basketball player.
Yeah, and exactly. And you have guys that play both ends, that compete, that know their role, know what they're doing offensively. Like, it makes for good basketball. It makes for consistent basketball. It makes for times when things get tough for other outs other than a dump down to Embiid on the elbow and make him just go to work. That is not going to happen anymore. And that's why I'm excited, man. Like, I look at this roster, I'm like, damn, that guy can play. Damn, that guy can play. He's going to be fighting for minutes. This guy's going to be fighting for minutes. And that hasn't happened before. And, I saw the lob 2 games ago, maybe to Oubre on the baseline from Paul Reed, by the way.
From Paul Reed, yeah.
That was my moment with Oubre where I was like, damn, dude, like that's going to be nice. That's going to be nice to have. And you look at the Brooklyn game, you had a Maxey steal, fast break dunk. You had a Melton steal, fast break dunk. And then, Paul Reed steal, fast break dunk. Like, possession, 3 in a row. Like, that shit doesn't happen. It didn't happen before. You didn't have guys that were free enough to do that. And now you have multiple guys that can do it. So I'm excited to see that all come together. And, you add Joel, who's an MVP candidate, into that mix. And they're going to be good, dude. They're going to be a good team. You just got to hope that this works out with Harden, because obviously things have not gone so well so far.
Yeah, and that Kelly Oubre lob was a moment of pure bliss for me as well. I was flipping back and forth between the Phillies and the Sixers preseason game. Not going to lie, caught a little bit of the Phillies fever myself as well. So I was going back and forth way more than I will be come regular season time. But I flipped the channel, and immediately the first thing I saw was just a lob from Paul Reed to Kelly Oubre. And I was like, things can't get any better right now. This is amazing that this is actually happening. But I do want to shift gears, talk about Joel Embiid a little bit specifically here, that he has yet to suit up in the preseason. The expectation was that he would play in that Nets game. He was a late scratch. He said he was feeling under the weather. That was what has been reported. Do you have any concern that he has not been out there at all? And like, I guess to me, I'll start with myself real quick. I just find it strange that he hasn't suited up at all in the preseason. And as we're getting all excited about this new defense, this new style of offense, the fact we haven't seen the best player on this team in it, and even if he fits in the system in the way that we're all hoping is the case, to me, it is a little bit concerning. So what's your thoughts on him not playing in the preseason thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I haven't even considered it that much. Like, I really just think it's one of those things where they're like, he doesn't need to. He's one of the best players in the world. Obviously, other big name guys are playing. I think a lot of them are trying to fit in. You look at a situation like Boston, all those guys have been playing, but they have 2 new starters, right? They have guys that are trying to, put these pieces together. Phoenix, same thing. You got like a monumental change in both of those places. Milwaukee, similarly, like they got to figure that out on the court against other teams. Joel's going to be Joel. I mean, I guess it's concerning. It doesn't make sense why he hasn't been playing aside from just avoiding injury. And maybe there's, that's where the concern lies, is like, what is holding you back from playing? But you look at years past, like Joel always starts off slow. People are going to freak out in the first 3 weeks being like, he's not scoring 30 a game. His splits are always awful in the first month of the season. Like, he just slowly ramps up. And at this point, man, like, I'm totally okay with that. Like, our focus is not November, December basketball. It's the spring and the summer. So let's try to get there. Let's be healthy. I don't know why he's not playing. It's been kind of weird. And like, Nurse has kind of just completely dismissed it altogether, which I don't know if it's good or bad thing, but they don't seem concerned themselves. So I don't know.
Yeah, they definitely don't seem concerned, but like to me, Joel consistently being a slow start to the season is all the more reason why he should be playing in preseason. And let's not front and pretend like this guy who is a guy who notoriously keeps himself in shape. Like we've seen the bad versions of Joel Embiid show up to start seasons, and I would prefer to avoid that outright if that's possible. So
Yeah.
playing through in preseason, in addition to the fact that I just think it's important for him to continue to get reps in this new system and figure things out. There's no better setting than to do that than a live game setting that preseason gives you the opportunity to do. Yes, I've heard great things about him at practice, and all accounts, he looks fully healthy. He looks in decent shape. That all of the behind the scenes reports from reporters sound good regarding Joel, but I want to see it in a live game action. That I want to see what he looks like when he's going against Nick Claxton in a preseason game. And yes, it's just preseason. It's not something that I'm like super worried about, but I would feel a little bit better right now if I just had like a visual of Joel Embiid playing in the Nick Nurse system with this new roster at this point in time. It sounds like he's shooting to play on Friday on the final preseason game, so we should have it there. But I would have preferred him to at least seen him in one of these preseason games. I feel.
I'm honestly totally fine that he didn't play against Brooklyn. They try to kill him, man. So I'm good with that. That's another thing too, dude. Like with a guy like that, with how he is, and obviously they've been playing at full intensity. They're not taking plays off. The
Mhm.
Sixers obviously, and they're all getting used to it. And with that Joel being as big and as dominant, as physical as he is, like you just pick up so many, like you just pick up miles throughout the season of just bumps, bruises, and things that linger. Like if they, I wish they could just be honest and say like, yeah, man, he's not playing because like we don't want to deal with this shit right now. Like if they just came out and said that, I'd be like, all right, fair enough, right? It makes enough sense for me. But it is strange to see him just not out there with really no explanation other than like feeling under the weather. I don't really buy that, but I do probably think it's just we're taking precaution.
Yeah, it's not something I'm losing sleep over, but I would feel a little bit better if I could just see it. And after Friday, like I'm sure I'll be fine. As like I just want to see how he looks in the more movement offensively and guys making cuts, guys doing all these things that I'm excited to see, but I want to see it with Joel Embiid because that's the only way this team is reaching its ceiling. But in other news with Joel Embiid that I want to touch on for today is Joel Embiid has agreed to a new shoe deal with Skechers now. So he's been with Adidas to start his career. He switched to Under Armour, and he is now making his third shoe change, and he'll be joining Skechers. I'll start off with you, James. What's just your immediate reaction to that? Do you care at all, or any comments here?
Yeah, I mean, originally I laughed. Skechers is just not what you
Dad
expect
shoe.
to hear. Yeah. Um, but I mean, I guess go for it, man. If they're going to try to rebuild their basketball branding, or any basketball branding at all, I don't really feel like they have any history there. But if they want to start somewhere, I would say that Joel Embiid is a pretty good place to start. So if they're going to try to make a jump here, and become part of this basketball community, Joel Embiid is a great place to start. And I'm sure you're going to mention the fact that you don't hear much about Joel and his shoes
Mhm.
over the last decade or so when he's had these different deals and everything. He hasn't, even with a signature sneaker, you really don't hear much about it. So maybe Skechers will do right by him, put out some commercials or do some billboards, whatever it might be. But it is just kind of funny to hear Skechers. I do think it's just going to be a generational bag. He's going to be
Oh
getting
yeah.
paid a ton of money. Otherwise,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if he would have done that. But good for him, for getting another shoe deal, of course, and also probably bringing in a lifetime's worth of money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he's certainly a guy that is fine in the financial category from
Yeah.
here on out. But I'll start. I'm excited by this. That I was very underwhelmed at both Adidas and Under Armour. I think the marketing of Joel Embiid has been very poor. That I think they've done a very bad job of promoting this guy to making him a face of their brand. And I think Skechers is better equipped to really push him based on them kind of starting from the bottom here. So I want to see more Joel Embiid. That it frustrates me personally that this is the reigning MVP of the league. This is a guy who has one of the most fun personalities of any basketball player that I have heard speak. And nationally, I still think the negative or the perception of him is pretty negative. That I don't think guys are just your random fan of basketball is a Joel Embiid fan. I don't think there's very many of those, and that frustrates me. That I think
Yeah.
he's very much enough of a talented player. Once again, the reigning MVP of the league, the guy that's led the NBA in scoring the past 2 seasons, and he has this awesome personality. And it frustrates me that how disliked he seems to be. And don't get me wrong, from certain teams and situations that we've been through. I get it. He's not a guy that has a flawless, I guess, track record for some of the altercations and all that stuff as well. But it would be cool for him to kind of be looked at as one of these like liked guys that is pushed by brands and in the media in the same way. And I would love if that's kind of the approach that Skechers takes with us. And I feel much more confident that they may be doing this than that was the case at Under Armour.
Yeah, and to be honest, I never liked these Under Armour shoes. I can't lie, I don't like Under Armour shoes really at all. But I thought they were boring and, like, to be honest, like, pretty beat. So good for him to move on. Maybe Skechers will do something cool with it. I know Julius Randle was sporting some Skechers shoes at Media Day this year. So if you haven't seen those, check those out. They don't look bad. Like, if you threw a Nike check on them, it might look better. And maybe it's just the
And another very funny storyline to me in this is you look at the other Skechers athletes that have been rolled out. Number one, Julius Randle, which you mentioned. We know the overhanging Knicks rumors that are connected to Joel Embiid there. And number two, Terrence Mann is a Skechers athlete, which somehow, some way seems to be the holdup in this entire James Harden conversation. And by the way, I think James Harden should be looking at that and saying, you are valuing Terrence Mann close to as much as me. I get it. There's draft picks and other things involved too. But Terrence Mann, while I like him, I think he's a fine player. He's a nobody in the scheme of the NBA world. He's not even a starter on the Clippers, nor would he be on the Sixers. So it's very funny to me that he's kind of lumped in this conversation that he is a Skechers athlete. But any thoughts on that one, James? All right, so ran into a little bit of technical issues with James's computer down the stretch here, but thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I'm going to wrap things up from here. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. Once again, thanks so much for listening in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit a like on this video, and we will continue to be with you for every step of this wild ride that is Sixers basketball. Thank you once again. I will talk with you next time. Peace.